My key takeaways from Brandon Sanderson's lecture class, part 1. Today I'm going to be talking about plot progression. In Brandon Sanderson's class, he broke down plot progression into 3 different parts: promises, progress, and payoff. He stressed that progress, or at least a sense of progress, is the most important of these 3. Often, us authors can get caught up in the payoffs, and thinking that the payoffs have to be the most important part of the story because those are the parts the readers are going to remember. Now, there is some truth to that. However, we need to remember that the payoffs are only satisfying if we feel like we were promised correctly what the payoff is going to be, and if we felt progress getting there. Brandon Sanderson talked about how we as authors have total control over the progress of the story. We could resolve the entire plot conflict in a single sentence if we wanted to. Frodo throws the ring into Mount Doom. Boom! All of Lord of the Rings condensed into a single sentence. However, that's not how we want the story to be told. We want the book to be long and interesting, full of characters and exciting conflicts and places and etc. So what we need to remember is that readers are only going to stay involved and invested in our story if we give them a sense of progress throughout the book. Otherwise, they're not going to realize why what's happening is important, and that's where readers lose interest. Now let's start with the first one, promises. Promises often come near the beginning of the story, although they can happen throughout the book, and each one sets up usually a specific payoff that happens later in the book. For instance, in Lord of the Rings, at the Council of Elrond, they say the only way to destroy the ring is to throw it into Mount Doom, and Frodo says, "I will take the ring to Mordor." That is a promise of story. That is a promise of winning conditions. We now as readers expect Frodo at some point to reach Mount Doom and throw the Ring of Power into the lava, at which point we will have won. Sauron will be destroyed and the conflict will be over. That is a very explicit type of promise that has a very specific type of payoff. There are also more implicit promises you can make with more implicit payoffs, such as at the beginning of a story, you have 2 brothers who don't quite get along very well. They have some conflict in their relationship, and at one point, one brother thinks, "Oh man, I remember when me and my brother used to be better friends and get along better," and then they move on. No real explicit promise, but the implicit promise to that is that at some point the reader would like to see a payoff of those 2 brothers making up and getting along. Those are the types of things you want to think about at the beginning of your story. What promises are you making your readers? And how do you want to pay those off at the ending? That's going to help you have a satisfying ending. Now, something that Brandon Sanderson suggested that I absolutely love is not to worry too much about the promises at the beginning of your story as you're going through. Now, this might play a little bit into whether or not you're a pantser or a plotter or a gardener or an architect, depending on whose terms you want to use. The point is, though, is sometimes at the beginning of the book, we're not quite sure how we want to finish it, and so we're not quite sure how to make those promises. But you don't need to panic. Write the book anyway, and then knowing what you want your payoff to be, you can go back to the beginning and sprinkle promises near the beginning and throughout the middle of your book. That'll help you not get frozen up in the beginning of the book feeling like you need to plan everything through to the ending climax, but also help you have payoffs that have specific promises that help set them up. There are lots of different types of promises you can have in your story, such as A-plot promises. This is what my story is about. These are the things my characters are going to be doing to try and save the world. Also, character arc relationship promises, like the one I mentioned earlier. These characters are going to fall in love, these characters are going to hate each other, these characters are going to make up, etc. As well as world or magic system promises, where you sprinkle in, here's something interesting that I'm not going to show you now, but knowing that you're now a little bit interested in it, I promise that I'm going to show you more later. Those are just some examples of the different types of promises you can put throughout your story. Promises generally happen at the beginning and toward the middle of your story, whereas payoffs start happening near the beginning and toward the end, with the climax being the final payoff of the A-plot of your story. Now, promises and payoffs are the ones we get caught up on a lot as authors because we feel like those are the things people will remember. And you're right, those are the things people will remember. However, as stated earlier, progress is probably actually the most important step of these 3. Promise, progress, and payoff. Because you have a single promise, and then you have a single payoff, or maybe you have multiple promises and multiple payoffs at the beginning or at the end of your book. However, everything in between is the progress. And readers don't read books just to read the beginning and then the end. We read books because we love the meat in the middle. And that all has to give your reader a sense of progress. So how do we do this? How do we give our readers a sense of progress? Again, I'm saying sense because you as the author control their actual progress. You can have them skip from point A to point Z as quickly as you like, but that probably wouldn't be satisfying. You need to help your readers understand that we are making progress slowly but surely to help them understand the importance of whatever quest or adventure your characters are going on. Brandon Sanderson has a couple of tips for these things that I'm now going to share with you. The first thing you want to keep in mind is that a sense of progress is oftentimes dictated by the genre of your story. I write fantasy, but there's lots of subgenres within fantasy. For example, lit RPG, where a lot of the story takes place within a game or a video game setting, has a different kind of progress or sense of progress than real-world fantasy stories. In a lit RPG, leveling up and gaining loot are both a sense of progress for your reader. And those don't exactly exist, at least not in that kind of set way, in a real-world fantasy story. Now, they do, because of course characters gain competence and can gain weapons, and that's a sense of progress you can put into your story. If my character at the beginning finds out he has magical powers, but doesn't know how to use them, as the story progresses, if he's slowly learning how to gain control of his powers and slowly they're becoming more and more helpful, that gives your reader a sense of progress on his personal journey. As far as the A-plot is concerned, I like giving my main villain some lieutenants, a main general, a captain, a lieutenant, that kind of thing. And as the story progresses, my characters get to slowly meet these characters, these villains, and defeat them. And with each villain we defeat, we know we're getting closer to the main bad guy. Because often I will introduce all of them at the beginning of my story. I'm like, hey, here's Sauron, here's Saruman, and then Saruman has his head orc, and then his head orc has whatever. And so we know how many villains there are. And as the story is progressing, our characters are slowly meeting these villains and defeating them. And with each one we defeat, we know that we're progressing. Something else you can think about is a map. Lots of fantasy readers like maps. And if you start in the Shire here and you know your ultimate goal is Mordor at the other end, then the closer and closer we get to Mordor, the more of a sense of progress we have. Oh, we reached Rivendell. That's significantly closer to Mordor than was the Shire. Oh, now we're in Minas Tirith. That's even closer to Mordor. So that's another way of giving them a sense of progress. I also just love fantasy maps. I mean, who doesn't like fantasy maps? So having a map and having kind of that travelogue style of progress is another way you can do this. The most important thing to remember is just that your readers want to feel like what they're reading is important. They want to root for your story. Don't feel like they're trying to shoot you down. They're not trying to be critics. They want this story to be the best thing they've ever read. And so they're trying to give you that stock. All you need to do is deliver on that, okay? And the way you do that is by helping them understand why everything they're reading is actually important. Now, not saying everything has to be solid, super hard plot progression, because having some fun and game and having some good character moments are really important as well. So don't skip all of that. Don't be too fast-paced or anything. Just make sure you don't get too bogged down or too sidetracked or have too many tangents, and make sure that your characters, make sure your readers understand the winning conditions of your story. If it's a romance, the winning conditions are the two main characters fall in love or get married or whatever. If it's fantasy, often it's beating the bad guy and saving the world at the end. If it's lit RPG, it's winning the game, right? Help your reader understand what the winning conditions are, what the main winning condition is, destroying the ring, and then what the mini road mapping winning conditions are on the way there, the mini goals getting there, right? First we need to leave the Shire, then we need to get to Elrond's place, and then we need to beat the different bad guys on the way there, then we need to find a way to get to Mordor, and that which includes, getting with the golem and all these different things. What are the goals and the steps we need to take in order to win the book, right? In order to become victorious. The sooner your reader understands those winning conditions, and the clearer you set out the map of this is what it's going to take to win, both on an A plot and a B plot scale, as well as character arc and character relationships and all that kind of stuff, the clearer all that is to your reader, and the clearer you mark, oh, now that we've reached this place, the closer we are to winning. Oh, now that this character can use this ability, the more competent he is. Or now that these two have cleared up their communication issues, the closer their bond is. The more clear all of that is, the more your readers will understand we're making progress. This isn't a tangent. This character conversation isn't a tangent because these two have an arc where they're going to make up their relationship. And so then they appreciate those conversations that happen. They recognize them as a sense of progress. So keep track of those kinds of things. Those are the things you want to be conscious of while writing your book. Again, don't get too caught up on making the right kinds of promises or payoffs. Brandon Sanderson talks about how payoffs are probably the easiest of these three to do, because you can go back and sprinkle the right promising. I mean, we all understand Sanderson's sense of immense foreshadowing. That's often what a promise is foreshadowing. If you foreshadow it right, then the payoff is going to be satisfying almost no matter what. But if we didn't feel the correct sense of progress getting there, then no matter how exciting or explosive your payoff is, we won't feel like we earned it because we didn't feel a sense of progress getting there. So really, in order to have a satisfying payoff, you want to have the promise, which is easy to set up and foreshadow. We all love foreshadowing and intrigue. But to have a satisfying promise, you really want to set up the sense of progress on the way there. So that's what you want to think about. I hope that was helpful. If you have questions, put them down in the comments. Have fun writing plots for your books, and I will see you in my next video.